I only wanted cheaper rent. That's how this started. Not with destiny. Not with romance. Definitely not with interstellar bonding law. Just rent. Earth joining the Galactic Housing Exchange Program was supposed to help struggling humans like me find culturally enriching cohabitation opportunities. The ad showed smiling species of various colors sharing meals and laughing over holographic board games. It did not mention reproductive simulation clauses buried in subparagraph 14. The apartment was perfect. 2 rooms. Shared kitchen. Gravity stable. Only slightly humming walls. And most importantly, half the price of anything else in the city dome. The lease was glowing. Literally. The script shifted colors while I scrolled. There were at least 3 alphabets I didn't recognize and a helpful translation AI that kept saying things like, cohabitation parameters aligned with interspecies compatibility standards. I clicked accept. Because I am a fool. She arrived the next day. Tall. Bronze-toned skin with faint bioluminescent patterns along her arms. Eyes like polished obsidian. Hair pulled back in a severe braid that somehow made her look both elegant and like she could bench press a shuttlecraft. She stepped inside, scanned the room once, then scanned me. You are the Terran male applicant? That should have been my first warning. Not. Hi. Not. Nice to meet you. Applicant. Yeah. I'm. She raised a slim metallic device and pointed it at my face. It beeped. Baseline vitals recorded. Acceptable. Acceptable is good, I said. I think. She extended a hand. Her grip was firm enough to suggest she could crack walnuts without trying. I am Tvara of the 9th Matriarch line. We will now begin cohabitation cycle 1. I laughed. She did not. It took exactly 12 minutes for my understanding of roommate to collapse. She unpacked efficiently, everything folded with military precision. Then she placed a small holographic projector on the kitchen counter. A rotating chart appeared in the air between us. By Galactic Housing Code, extended cohabitation between compatible species qualifies as applied reproductive simulation, she said calmly. Your species is categorized as adaptive genetic variable. This makes you optimal for practice. Practice, I repeated. Yes. Mating practice. I waited for the punchline. There was no punchline. You mean like dating? I asked carefully. She tilted her head. Clarify. Like dinner. Movies. Mild emotional vulnerability? She tapped her device again. Negative. Structured compatibility assessment. Performance metrics. Behavioral synchronization. She said it the way someone might say, grocery shopping. I rubbed my temples. I signed up for shared rent. Yes, she said. Shared domestic environment enhances bonding simulation accuracy. That's not what bonding means where I'm from. She frowned slightly, then made a note on her device. Human semantics, imprecise. That first week was a blur of confusion. Every morning she announced the cycle count. Cycle 3, observe grooming ritual. I brushed my teeth while she took notes. Cycle 5, assess stamina under gravitational variance. She increased the apartment's gravity by 10% while I carried groceries. Cycle 8, initiate verbal attraction exchange. She stared at me across the table and said, your skeletal density is above average for your size. This is desirable. I choked on my water. You could just say I look nice. She paused, genuinely considering that. Correction. You look nice. There was something about the way she said it, like she was testing unfamiliar code, that made my ears warm. I tried to push back. Look, I said one evening, leaning against the counter while she adjusted her data charts. Where I come from, you don't just schedule this stuff. It's messy. Improvised. Improvised? She repeated cautiously. Yeah. You don't measure everything. Sometimes you just feel it out. She stared at me for a long moment. Explain feel. That should not be a difficult question. And yet. I stepped closer, ignoring the tiny spike in my pulse. It's like, you don't know exactly what you're doing, but you do it anyway. Because you want to. She didn't write that down. For the first time since she arrived, she looked uncertain. Your species bonds without predefined structure? She asked quietly. Pretty much. That seems inefficient. Extremely. I agreed. But it works. Something shifted after that. She still logged data. Still tracked cycles. But she hesitated before increasing gravity. She asked questions that weren't on her chart. What do humans find appealing? She asked one night, sitting across from me, braid draped over one shoulder. Confidence helps, I said. Also not treating them like lab specimens. Her lips twitched. Noted. And maybe don't call me Terran male applicant. She considered. What is your preferred designation? I told her my name. She repeated it slowly, carefully. Not like a variable. Like it mattered. By cycle 25, the apartment didn't feel like a testing facility anymore. It felt like something else. She laughed sometimes. Short, surprised bursts like she wasn't used to the sound. I caught myself looking forward to her analytical observations because they always ended with that slight head tilt when she was confused by human behavior. Cycle 29 came with a strange tension. She stood in the center of the living room, holographic chart glowing faintly. Practice cycle 29 complete, she said. Cool, I replied, trying to ignore the odd tightness in my chest. So what happens at 30? Do we get a trophy? She didn't smile. Instead, she expanded a section of the lease agreement in the air between us. The glowing script rearranged itself into Terran Standard. Subparagraph 14. Extended practice beyond 30 cycles equals legally bonded pair. I blinked. That's a joke. She slowly shook her head. Galactic contracts do not contain humor. We both looked at the cycle counter hovering beside the clause. She met my eyes. There is one additional scheduled assessment tonight, she said quietly. The room suddenly felt smaller. You're telling me, I said carefully, that if we hit 31, we will be legally recognized as bonded under 9th matriarch law. Silence stretched between us. I let out a slow breath. So basically, if we keep being roommates. Yes. We get accidentally married. Her bioluminescent markings flickered faintly along her arms. Yes. Neither of us had read the fine print. And somewhere deep in orbit, bureaucratic alien systems were probably already counting down to cycle 30. I didn't sleep. Not because of fear. Okay, partially because of fear. But mostly because every time I closed my eyes, that glowing clause replayed in my head like a badly subtitled horror movie. Extended practice beyond 30 cycles equals legally bonded pair. You'd think that kind of thing would be in bold. Maybe flashing red. Maybe accompanied by a small warning siren. Instead, it had been tucked between something about shared sanitation protocols and mutual atmospheric tolerance agreements. Romance, apparently, was a footnote. Morning came too fast. Tavara was already standing in the kitchen when I walked out, posture straight, expression composed in that dangerously calm way that meant she'd been thinking all night. Cycle 30, she said. I froze halfway to the nutrient dispenser. We can still stop, right? Just pause everything. Rewind. Pretend we never brushed our teeth in proximity to each other. She turned her wrist and projected the lease again. The clause glowed brighter than it had the night before, as if it sensed my denial. Cessation of cohabitation prior to completion of cycle 31 voids bonding escalation, she recited. Good. Great. So we just don't do cycle 31. She looked at me carefully. We completed cycle 30 late last night. My brain took a full 3 seconds to catch up. We did not. You remained within the shared domestic space past the cycle marker. That counts? Yes. That's ridiculous. She tilted her head. Galactic contracts value consistency. I dragged a hand down my face. So we're on 31. Yes. Silence settled over the kitchen like gravity had increased again. We can challenge it, I said weakly. File paperwork. Say there was a translation error. Claim I thought practice meant board games. Her gaze softened in a way that was far more unsettling than her analytical stare. Bond contracts under 9th Matriarch Law are not casually dissolved. What happens if you try? She hesitated. That was new. Dishonor, she said finally. For me. For my lineage. Lineage. Right. I'd known she came from something important. The way she held herself wasn't random. It was trained. Disciplined. Like she'd grown up under expectations heavy enough to bend steel. My mother oversees bond validations, she added. Of course she does. Oversees? I repeated carefully. Like science paperwork? She conducts inspection. Inspection. That word did not belong anywhere near my life. And when exactly does this inspection happen? I asked, already dreading the answer. She lifted her wrist again. A new message pulsed across the screen in sharp, authoritative script. Inspection request confirmed. Matriarch arrival scheduled. Time remaining, 12 Terran hours. You already filed it? I said, voice cracking slightly. Bond escalation automatically notifies lineage authority. So your mom knows? Yes. And she's coming here? Yes. I looked around our apartment. The slightly crooked couch. The half-empty container of protein snacks on the table. My laundry chair. This is how I die, I muttered. Tvara stepped closer, her movements less rigid than usual. You will not die. That's comforting. My mother values strength and honesty. If you demonstrate both, the inspection will conclude efficiently. I once pulled a muscle reaching for cereal, I said. How strong are we talking? A faint glow shimmered along her arms. Amusement, I realized. Physical metrics are only one component. Great. So she'll also psychologically dismantle me. She likely will. I stared at her. You say that like it's normal. It is normal. Of course it is. For a moment neither of us spoke. The weight of it hung there, this thing that had started as awkward cohabitation and somehow accelerated into legally binding interstellar commitment. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said quietly. The confession hit harder than the contract. I know, I said. I selected a human roommate because your species is classified as highly adaptable. Mating simulations with adaptable partners improve performance confidence. Glad to be of service. She winced slightly. I did not anticipate deviation. Deviation? She looked directly at me. No charts. No device. Just her. I did not anticipate enjoying your presence beyond measurable parameters. That shut me up. The kitchen felt smaller again, but not in a suffocating way. More like the air had shifted. You could have stopped at 29, I said slowly. Her bioluminescent markings flickered faintly. Yes. You didn't. No. There it was. Not a glitch in the contract. Not a bureaucratic accident. A choice. You realize this means we have to convince a war general alien matriarch that this isn't just you accidentally speedrunning a bonding clause, I said. Her posture straightened slightly at the word war general. My mother is formidable, she agreed. That's a diplomatic way to say terrifying. Yes. I paced the length of the living room, mind racing. Panic was one option. Fainting was another. Running back to Earth and pretending this entire planet didn't exist was deeply tempting. Or, we prepare. Okay, I said, turning back to her. If this is an inspection, then we give her something to inspect. She blinked. Clarify. We show her this isn't some bureaucratic fluke. We show her we actually function. Function. Together, I finished. Her gaze sharpened, not cold, but focused. You propose strategic presentation. Exactly. Humans do this all the time. Job interviews. Meeting the parents. Jury duty. You equate my mother to jury duty? High stakes. Judgmental authority figure. Same energy. She considered that. What would this presentation entail? I grabbed my tablet and began pacing again. Timeline of cohabitation. Demonstrations of compatibility. Inside jokes. Evidence we don't hate each other. We do not hate each other, she said immediately. Good. That's a strong start. For the next hour, we built what might be the most absurd slideshow in galactic history. Slide 1. Cycle 1, Initial Confusion. Slide 7. Gravity Incident, Mutual Adaptation. Slide 14. Human Humor Exposure, 32% increase in subject laughter. She watched me improvise captions with something like fascination. You are remarkably calm, she observed. I am absolutely not calm, I replied. I'm weaponizing chaos. A faint smile tugged at her lips. By midday, the panic had transformed into nervous energy. The apartment felt like a staging ground. Her comm device pulsed again. Atmospheric disturbance detected. Matriarch vessel entering local orbit. She looked at me. I looked at her. 12 hours ago, I said softly. I just had a roommate. Yes. Now I might have a wife. Her markings glowed brighter this time, softer. Yes. A deep vibration rolled through the building as something enormous settled above the city dome. She straightened instinctively, every inch the disciplined daughter of a powerful lineage. Arrival in 15 minutes, she said. I exhaled slowly. Okay, I muttered. Let's survive your mom. The sound of heavy boots on the floor above made my stomach drop. I had expected tension, yes, but not an atmosphere that seemed to vibrate with sheer authority. The door to the apartment slid open, and there she was, Tavares' mother. A towering figure, all sharp angles and muscles that somehow moved with grace. Her skin shimmered faintly under the overhead lights, patterned like a ceremonial armor plate, and her eyes scanned the room with the precision of a predator assessing prey. She paused on me for a moment, and I felt as though my soul had just been weighed on a scale of galactic judgment. You are the Terran male? She said, her voice deep enough to rattle the air. Yes. I managed voice a pitch higher than intended. That's me. Terran male. Roommate. Applicant. Legal thing. Her gaze flicked to Tvara, then back to me. Physically unimpressive. I swallowed hard. Emotionally devastating, I muttered under my breath. Tavares' head snapped toward me in horror, clearly alarmed at my cheek. The matriarch ignored it. We begin assessment. Assessment. I had survived human finals week. I had survived 3-hour government queues. I had survived awkward introductions to my in-laws' cats. This, however, felt like a lethal combination of all three. The first part was physical. She increased gravity incrementally while instructing me to lift objects, jump from one platform to another, and maintain balance under conditions that made every muscle scream. I stumbled a few times, nearly knocking over the kitchen table, but somehow, by sheer luck, or human stubbornness, I passed each trial. Tavares' mother made a note each time, expression unreadable, but I caught the faintest flicker of acknowledgement when I managed a particularly clumsy but successful leap. Next came psychological evaluation. The matriarch asked questions meant to destabilize me, insults designed to test mental endurance and humility. Terran males are chaotic, she stated, scanning her device. Predictably inefficient. I took a breath. Yes. We're chaotic. We're inefficient. But we adapt. And sometimes that works better than your structured methods. Her eyes narrowed then, something astonishing, relaxed. She had expected panic, submission, or an implosion of ego. Instead, she got confidence delivered with awkward human humor. Finally, she observed the bond between me and Tvara. She expected rigid performance of mating rituals, precise gestures, and the solemnity of generations. What she got instead were shared glances, accidental touches, nervous laughter, and moments where Tavares' bioluminescent patterns flickered in genuine amusement. I realized then that what terrified her wasn't weakness. It was unpredictability, and humans were unpredictable in ways no alien system could fully calculate. The way Tvara leaned into my jokes, the way I shrugged at her charts and still managed to comply with essential rules, this combination was apparently compelling. She stepped forward, towering above me, gaze fixed. "Why does she smile at your chaos?" "She likes it," Tvara admitted, voice quieter than I'd ever heard. The matriarch's scrutiny shifted to me. "Why should I accept you?" I opened my mouth to lie, to present a calculated argument with references and metrics. Then I realized no chart, no lecture, no logical explanation would suffice here. "I didn't plan any of this," I said honestly. "I'm flawed. I make mistakes. I don't follow instructions well. I get overwhelmed by gravity adjustments and bureaucratic clauses. But," I looked at Tvara, "I choose her. I choose her, and I'll do my best to care for her in whatever way we both need." She regarded me silently. My chest tightened under the weight of her gaze. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. It wasn't a warm nod. It wasn't approving in the way Tvara had learned to nod at me. It was acknowledgement. Recognition. Acceptance. Tvara's shoulders relaxed for the first time during this entire ordeal. She had been tense, disciplined, worried that I would fail to pass a standard she had always excelled at. Now she knew that the unpredictable human she had been assessing for weeks, whether he realized it or not, had passed in a way no algorithm could predict. The matriarch's final test came unexpectedly. She leaned down to whisper in Tvara's ear, words in a language so deep and resonant that I felt it in my chest. I couldn't understand them, but the reaction was clear. Tvara's markings brightened, her posture straightened, and then she turned toward me with an expression that combined relief, pride, and something softer I wasn't quite ready to name. "Do you understand?" she asked me in halting common, her tone lighter than before. "I think so," I said. "I'm approved?" "Yes," she replied. "But remember, if you dishonor her, Terran male, I will return." I swallowed. "Noted." Loudly. "Clear." "Absolutely." The matriarch straightened, towering once again, and for a moment, the apartment felt impossibly small beneath her presence. Then, without a word, she pivoted and left, the air settling in her absence like a storm past. I exhaled, feeling muscles I didn't know I had relaxed simultaneously. Tvara looked at me, eyes wide, markings flickering softly in that unfamiliar pattern I had come to understand as emotion. "We survived," I said cautiously. "Yes," she whispered, a small, incredulous smile breaking through her composure. I laughed, the sound awkward, relieved, and entirely human. "We survived your mother." Her gaze met mine, and for the first time, the apartment didn't feel like a testing ground. It felt like home. We sank onto the couch, shoulder to shoulder, neither of us speaking for a long moment. Outside, the alien world continued its bureaucratic rhythms, but inside, the chaos that had begun as a lease clause, as a contractual obligation, had transformed into something much harder to quantify. Something human. Something unpredictable. Something we would figure out together. And in that calm after the storm, I realized that surviving Tvara's mother was only the beginning. The real challenge, and the real comedy, was living with her as more than a roommate, under a contract I didn't read, in a galaxy where humans had no idea how powerful we could be. We exchanged a glance, the kind that carried everything words couldn't capture: relief, nervous excitement, and maybe the first hint of something dangerously close to love. "Do you want to celebrate surviving?" I asked. She considered, then smirked faintly. "Yes. But with metrics. We need baseline data." I groaned. "Of course. I wouldn't have it any other way." And somehow, in that ridiculous, high-stakes, legally binding chaos, it felt perfect. The apartment was quiet for the first time since Tvara moved in. Quiet, except for the faint hum of her device's running background simulations, and the occasional flutter of bioluminescent patterns on her skin, now soft and calm instead of tense and analytical. The matriarch had left, her verdict delivered, her warning still echoing in my ears. If I dishonored Tvara, she would return. Not just to scold, but to enforce rules that could make my life very short. I sank onto the couch beside Tvara, letting out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for hours. She perched next to me, the holographic chart of cohabitation cycles hovering faintly above the coffee table. I stared at it, and then back at her. "So," I said, trying to sound casual while my pulse insisted otherwise, "we're officially bonded." She tilted her head. "Legally recognized under 9th matriarch law." I nodded. "Right. Accidentally married." Her markings flickered faintly, maybe amusement, maybe disbelief. "Statistically improbable," she said, voice quiet. "Emotionally acceptable." I laughed. "Emotionally acceptable? That's the nicest contract language I've ever heard." We sat in silence for a moment, absorbing what had just happened. It was surreal. 12 hours ago, I was a human looking for cheap rent. Now, I was officially bonded to an alien from a powerful lineage, with a mother who could probably level a building if she disapproved. Somehow, despite all the absurdity, I felt a strange warmth. A sense of accomplishment that wasn't just surviving the inspection, but surviving it together. "You extended the cycles intentionally, didn't you?" I asked after a pause. Her gaze softened, and she didn't immediately answer. "Yes," she admitted. "I could have stopped at 29. I didn't." I raised an eyebrow. "So this was partly planned?" "Yes," she said, markings pulsing faintly along her arms. "I wanted to ensure success. To ensure I would learn, adapt, and not fail during real pairing trials. And perhaps to see if I could trust you." The word trust hit harder than any contract clause. I had expected tests, inspections, bureaucratic hurdles, but not vulnerability. Not honesty. Not her letting me see the careful calculation behind the disciplined exterior. I reached out, hesitating only slightly, and touched her hand. Her eyes widened briefly, then softened. The warmth radiating from her surprised me, a biological and emotional feedback I wasn't prepared for but secretly thrilled by. "I didn't know what I was signing up for," I said honestly. "I didn't read the fine print. I didn't expect any of this." She tilted her head toward me. "Yet you survived." "Barely," I admitted. "But I did. And I care about you. In my own human way. Which is chaotic, messy, and sometimes inappropriate, but genuine." Her markings flickered again, this time clearly affection. "I believe you." We laughed softly, that awkward, shared laughter that only comes after surviving a crisis together. The apartment no longer felt like a testing facility. The gravity settings, the cycle counters, the charts, and the devices were now props in the story of us, a story no galactic algorithm could fully calculate. "Do you know what the galaxy will say?" I asked, half joking. "About humans getting bonded accidentally?" She smirked faintly. "They will call it improbable. They may attempt to replicate it. They will fail." "High praise," I said. "I feel accomplished." We spent the next hour in the quiet hum of domesticity, talking about nothing and everything: what humans eat for breakfast, what aliens consider polite small talk, and how absurd it was that a legal clause had inadvertently arranged our lives. The more I learned about her, the more I appreciated the careful balance between discipline and subtle vulnerability that defined her. And the more she learned about me, the more she seemed amused at my chaotic methods, my improvisation, and my stubborn refusal to follow any system she couldn't understand. Eventually, I stood and stretched. "So, what now? Do we tell the neighbors? Do we update the lease records? Or do we just live?" She watched me carefully, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "We live. Together. As required. And possibly happily?" I asked, teasing. "Possibly," she said, letting her markings flicker in patterns I had come to recognize as playful. I sat back down beside her, our shoulders touching. The absurdity of it all, the accidental legal bonding, the terrifying mother, the alien regulations, had faded into something warmer. Something human. We had survived alien bureaucracy, cosmic expectations, and interstellar formalities. Now it was time to navigate life together, in our own chaotic, improvisational, human-approved way. Do humans ever regret impulsive bonds? She asked softly, eyes meeting mine. Only the boring ones, I said, grinning. We, apparently, are not boring. She laughed, a short, surprised sound that made the room feel alive. She leaned against me slightly, letting the gentle warmth of her presence settle between us. I realized then that all the chaos, the contract clauses, the inspections, and the tests had led to this, a moment of genuine connection that no algorithm, no rule, no matriarchal decree could fully measure or predict. For the first time since this all began, I felt at ease. My human unpredictability, my chaotic tendencies, my tendency to improvise rather than follow a plan, these weren't liabilities. They were strengths, and they had won over not just Farah, but even the formidable matriarch herself. I glanced at her, and she glanced back. Neither of us needed words. The lease, the cycles, the legal bonding, all of it mattered less now. What mattered was that we had survived together. And somewhere in that survival, in that shared laughter and awkward intimacy, we had found something worth more than compliance, contracts, or even galactic approval. I reached over and took her hand again, holding it lightly but firmly. She squeezed back, faintly, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of what we had accomplished, not just surviving the matriarch, not just adhering to alien law, but creating a bond that was ours, chaotic, unpredictable, and entirely human at its core. I wanted just a roommate. Instead, I got all of this. And for once, I wouldn't trade it for anything.